In 1939, when the world slid back into fire, Germany did not consider the United States a real military threat. American cinema? Yes. American money? Absolutely. But American soldiers? Laughable. In reports of the Oberkommando des Heeres, OKH, the U.S. Army was dismissed as politically unstable, poorly trained, technically weak. To German officers, America was a country of businessmen, farm boys and jazz musicians, not warriors. When Germany crushed France in just 46 days, the Reich believed it had proven its superiority to decadent democracies. If France fell so fast, what could America possibly do? The U.S. Army in 1940 had less than 190,000 men, smaller than that of Portugal. It ranked 17th in the world, behind even Romania. The Wehrmacht had over 4 million soldiers. Germany expected America to stay across the Atlantic, shouting about freedom while Europe burned. Hitler said at the Berghof, "Americans are incapable of war. They are a mixture of races with no fighting spirit." German newspapers wrote that America would fight with mechanics instead of soldiers. They called U.S. troops Sunday warriors. They believed American troops would break at the first real battle, that they lacked discipline, will, tradition. They believed democracy produced weak armies. They were wrong. Not immediately, not obviously, but completely, because they made one fatal miscalculation. They confused lack of preparation with lack of potential. The United States was not a military nation, but it was an industrial one. It did not worship war, but it understood organization. It did not march in goose-step parades, but it could build, adapt, and move faster than any enemy it had ever faced. The Wehrmacht believed it would defeat America with experience and tactics. It did not understand what was coming. A war fought not by tradition, but by system. A war not won by genius generals, but by production lines, logistics routes, engineers, radios, code breakers, and relentless movement. A war of speed, steel, fuel, and will. Germany did not fear America, considered it a joke. But every war has a moment when laughter stops. And for Germany, that moment was approaching. Germany feared Soviet manpower and British stubbornness. But no one in the Wehrmacht feared factories. Until 1942, the Germans believed that American industry was too slow to mobilize for a real war. But they were wrong. America couldn't be defeated on the battlefield, because America was fighting a different kind of war. A war of machines, assembly lines, and steel. In 1942, something terrifying happened, not on a battlefield, but inside a factory. The United States began industrial mobilization. A switch was flipped, and the entire nation became a military machine. Car factories became tank plants. Typewriter factories began making machine guns. Piano factories switched to building wooden wings for training planes. Oil companies started producing aviation fuel by the millions of barrels. It wasn't mobilization, it was transformation. By 1943, Germany finally saw the numbers, and for the first time they hesitated. The U.S. was producing more planes in a month than Germany and Japan together could replace in combat losses. Ford's Willow Run plant started building one B-24 Liberator bomber every 55 minutes. Henry Kaiser built cargo ships so fast they were called Liberty ships, launched in 4 days from dry dock to sea. Detroit Arsenal rolled out 28 tanks a day. One single American factory produced more trucks than the entire German war industry. General Alfred Jodl later admitted at Nuremberg, "Once I saw the figures of American production, I knew the war was lost." This was the first shock for Germany. They had never fought an enemy like this. An enemy that could replace every destroyed tank, every lost gun, every sunk ship, and then build more. The Wehrmacht began to understand a brutal truth. They could win battles, but America could win a war of exhaustion. The German army believed in blitzkrieg, hit fast before the enemy can react. But how do you blitz a country that can build an army faster than you can destroy it? War had now become a race, and America had just pressed the throttle. In August 1944, the German High Command received reports that seemed impossible. The Allied armies were advancing faster than their own supply lines could predict. American tank divisions were moving 50 kilometers a day. something no army in history had ever done on such scale. Field Marshal Model dismissed it as propaganda. He was wrong. Behind the thunder of Patton's tanks roared a hidden army, one without medals or guns. It was called the Red Ball Express. After the breakout from Normandy, American forces had pushed deep into France, but the ports were still under German control. The front was moving too fast, and fuel was running out. If the tanks stopped, the entire advance would collapse. So the U.S. Army did something no one expected. It created a rolling pipeline of trucks, operating day and night, hauling supplies straight from the beaches to the front lines. Over 6,000 trucks, most of them GMC and Dodge, ran in a constant loop on a one-way road system marked with red balls. Drivers, mostly African-American soldiers, worked under constant exhaustion, rain, and air attacks. They called it hell on wheels, but they never stopped. Every day, 12,000 tons of fuel, ammunition, and food moved forward, more than the German army could deliver by rail. The Red Ball Express kept Patton's Third Army alive, allowing it to encircle German divisions and break through the Siegfried Line. German officers couldn't understand how American tanks never ran out of fuel. They thought the Allies had secret reserves or captured depots. The truth was simpler: they had logistics that worked. By November, the Red Ball Express had delivered over 400,000 tons of supplies. It wasn't strategy that broke Germany's defense. It was movement, an endless flow of steel, fuel, and will. General Eisenhower later said, "Victory depended on two things: the Red Ball Express and our ability to keep it moving." In 1944, German commanders started noticing something strange. American forces reacted too fast. Artillery arrived within minutes. Air strikes appeared almost instantly after a contact report. It felt like the Americans knew everything. They didn't have spies in every trench, they had radios. Every U.S. tank, every platoon, every jeep, even artillery observers and engineers, carried FM radios. The Sherman tank used the Motorola SCR 508, the first frequency-modulated radio ever used in mass combat. Unlike German AM radios, which crackled, faded, and revealed positions, FM sets were crystal clear, stable, and impossible to intercept effectively. Changed everything. For the first time in history, commanders could lead a moving battle in real time. A tank company could report enemy armor in seconds, call artillery on target in minutes, and coordinate an airstrike before the Germans even understood what was happening. German reports called it the invisible weapon of the Americans. They thought it was magic. It wasn't. It was engineering. While German units relied on runners, flag signals, and vulnerable AM transmissions, U.S. troops operated like a connected organism. The result was chaos for the Wehrmacht. No matter how good their tactics were, American coordination was faster. At the Battle of the Bulge, it was communication, not numbers, that saved the front. Units cut off by snow and shelling stayed in contact through field radios, redirecting reinforcements in real time. Where the Germans had silence, the Americans had. Where the Germans had silence, the Americans had coordination. During the Normandy campaign, the U.S. Army deployed over 50,000 field radios in less than 3 months. Infantry battalions used SCR 300 walkie-talkies, developed by Motorola engineer Daniel Noble, the first portable FM radios in the world. Each soldier could talk directly to tanks, artillery, or aircraft overhead. Turned chaos into control. When Patton's Third Army swept through France, it wasn't luck or speed. It was communication. German panzers couldn't redeploy fast enough because they relied on wired networks or couriers. The Americans, meanwhile, adjusted every hour. A platoon commander could call an airstrike from a field phone. A recon jeep could warn an entire division in under 5 minutes. And artillery could fire within 90 seconds after a target was spotted. A German intelligence officer later wrote, "We fought men, but we lost to their system." By late 1944, captured Wehrmacht documents began mentioning a new term, Gefechtsnetz, battle network. It was their attempt to describe what they were facing, a military that operated like a single connected machine. The irony was that it didn't come from any general's genius. It came from American engineers, electricians, and factory workers who had built an army that could talk to itself. In 1944, the Germans still believed their artillery was the best in the world. They had legendary 88mm guns, precise, powerful, feared. But when they met American artillery, they realized something terrifying. It wasn't about power anymore. It was about speed. For the first time in history, an army could deliver coordinated fire from multiple batteries in less than 3 minutes after spotting the enemy. The U.S. Army's fire control system, based on slide rules, radios, and pre-registered maps, allowed instant responses that the Wehrmacht couldn't match. German officers were stunned by what they called the invisible barrage. 1 minute there was silence, the next entire positions were erased. They later discovered that the U.S. had created a new doctrine, time on target, TOT. It worked like this. Every artillery unit calculated the travel time of its shells so that hundreds of rounds from different batteries would hit the same target at the same second. The enemy never heard the approach, only the impact. At the Battle of El Geder, Tunisia, in 1943, a single American division delivered over 3,000 shells in 5 minutes, annihilating a German counterattack before it reached the front line. By 1944, this precision fire became the backbone of U.S. tactics in Europe. German reports complained, "American artillery reacts before our observers can finish a message." It was true. Thanks to FM radios and decentralized command, artillery units didn't wait for orders, they acted. If infantry called for help, guns opened fire in minutes. For every German round fired, the Americans answered with 10, and every 10th shell hit exactly where it was meant to. The Germans had the better gun. The Americans had the better system. The Wehrmacht believed it understood logistics, roads, bridges, supply lines. But in 1944, as American forces pushed through France and the Low Countries, German commanders saw something they had never encountered before. An army that built faster than it fought. Everywhere the U.S. Army went, the engineers followed. They didn't wait for victory, they created it. When German bombers destroyed bridges, U.S. engineers built new ones overnight. When rain turned roads into rivers of mud, they laid down steel mesh and timber tracks. When rivers blocked the advance, they launched pontoon bridges, not in days but in hours. At the height of the European campaign, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers could throw a 110-foot Bailey Bridge across a river in under 6 hours. Each section was modular, assembled by hand, without cranes or heavy equipment. German troops couldn't believe it. Their reports described bridges that appear overnight. In Normandy, the engineers built over 2,500 miles of roads in 60 days. During Patton's dash across France, they constructed 37 bridges in 10 days. They repaired railways, built fuel pipelines, cleared mines, and even erected entire airfields in record time. But the most shocking moment came at the Remagen Bridge, March 1945. The Germans had destroyed every Rhine crossing except one. The Ludendorff Bridge still stood. When American forces reached it, it was wired with explosives, but they charged anyway. Under machine gun fire, engineers cut the fuses, crawled through debris, and secured the bridge. Within 24 hours, U.S. forces had crossed the Rhine, something even the German high command thought impossible before May. Hitler ordered every officer responsible for defending the bridge executed. Because that single moment, that bridge, broke Germany's last defense line. It wasn't tanks that did it. It was engineers with wrenches, ropes, and courage. The Germans learned that day. You can destroy roads, but you can't stop the people who know how to rebuild them. For years, Blitzkrieg had been Germany's signature. Speed, surprise, coordination. But in 1944, that doctrine was turned against them. The man who did it was George S. Patton. Patton understood what most generals didn't, that momentum wins wars. He didn't wait for orders, for supplies, or for permission. He moved, and his army followed like a living organism. Between August and September 1944, Patton's Third Army advanced over 600 miles, liberated more than 80,000 square kilometers, and destroyed multiple German divisions, all while outrunning its own fuel trucks. How? Communication, logistics, and pure aggression. Every tank, jeep, and gun was connected through radios, the invisible veins of the army. Fuel convoys from the Red Ball Express raced day and night to keep the columns moving. Patton's orders were short, brutal, and electric. Attack, attack, attack. German commanders were stunned. They were used to being the hunters, now they were the hunted. Their defensive plans collapsed faster than they could draw new lines on the map. Every time they thought they'd halted the Americans, the sound of engines grew louder again. At the Battle of Ericourt, September 1944, a German panzer force twice the size of Patton's armored division was annihilated in foggy fields. Not by numbers, but by mobility and coordination. U.S. tankers fired, relocated, and struck again before German gunners could react. When prisoners were questioned, one colonel admitted, "We thought we were fighting tanks. We were fighting a system." Patton didn't invent speed warfare. He perfected it with radios, fuel, and nerve. By late 1944, the phrase American Blitz started appearing in German reports. The Reich had lost its greatest weapon, and didn't even realize it. In 1940, Germany ruled the air. The Messerschmitt Bf 109, FW 190, and Ju 87 Stuka were the terror of Europe. But by 1944, that dominance had vanished. The Luftwaffe wasn't defeated in one battle, it was drowned in metal. The turning point wasn't a single airplane, it was a machine called American industry. Factories from Seattle to New Jersey worked 24 hours a day, producing 96,000 aircraft a year. By the time Germany built one fighter, America built 8. But it wasn't just numbers. It was the kind of planes they built and how they were used. The P-47 Thunderbolt, once mocked as slow and clumsy, became the nightmare of the Luftwaffe. It could dive faster than any German plane, carry 8.50 caliber guns, and survive damage that would tear others apart. The P-51 Mustang, with its long-range tanks, escorted bombers deep into Germany, all the way to Berlin, and brought them back alive. Suddenly, even German aces like Galland and Hartmann were fighting battles they couldn't win. At 30,000 feet, B-17s and B-24s flew in formations so dense they looked like cities in the sky. Each wave carried death in tons, and precision that grew deadlier with every month. Factories, railways, and refineries that once fueled the Reich vanished under clouds of bombs. By 1944, the Luftwaffe was losing 25% of its pilots every month. They couldn't train replacements fast enough. Fuel was gone. Engines were failing. And yet the American planes kept coming day and night. They called it the air that never slept. German soldiers learned to fear the sound of engines before dawn. They hid in forests. They stopped moving in daylight. Because in the sky, death had a star and stripes on its wings. German officers entering North Africa in 1942 had one certainty, that American soldiers would break under real pressure. They called them amateurs in uniform. But at Kasserine Pass, after the initial defeat, something unexpected happened. The Americans didn't collapse, they learned. And they came back harder. From North Africa to Sicily, from Normandy to the Ardennes, the U.S. Army changed faster than any army in history. They absorbed punishment, studied mistakes, and returned with vengeance. Every defeat became an instruction. Every loss a reason to hit back. By 1944, German officers began reporting a disturbing trend. American soldiers adapt unnaturally fast. They fight without pause. They seem unaffected by losses. This wasn't because of ideology or fanaticism. It was something else, a collective belief that no one gets left behind. American units fought not for empire or glory, but for each other. That simple fact made them unpredictable and unstoppable. At Omaha Beach, men drowned under fire and still pressed forward. At Bastogne, surrounded by German tanks in the freezing snow, the 101st Airborne refused to surrender. When the Germans demanded their surrender, General McAuliffe replied with one word: nuts. By the end of the war, German prisoners described the Americans not as the strongest soldiers, but as the most persistent. They didn't stop when outnumbered. They didn't stop when surrounded. They didn't stop ever. The Wehrmacht had discipline. The Americans had something far more dangerous. Momentum born of belief. In early 1945, Germany was still fighting but not winning. Its armies were retreating, its fuel gone, its cities in ruins. What once was blitzkrieg had turned into survival. The officers who once laughed at America now sat in bunkers reading reports they could no longer comprehend. Entire divisions erased overnight by bombers they couldn't stop. Bridges rebuilt by U.S. engineers in hours. Tank columns moving with precision they once claimed impossible. Radio chatter filling every frequency, unstoppable, like an industrial heartbeat. The Reich's generals began asking one another the same question. How can they still fight like this? By March, the answer was clear. They weren't fighting with men alone. They were fighting with a system, an army powered by factories, guided by radios, supplied by roads, shielded by air, and carried by a will that refused to die. The American flag now advanced not with fanfare, but with the grinding of engines, the roar of artillery, and the silence that followed. Every mile conquered was another lesson burned into German memory, that arrogance blinds faster than defeat. When German POWs were interviewed after the war, many repeated the same line. We didn't lose to soldiers. We lost to an organization. And that was true, because America hadn't just built weapons. It had built momentum, an unstoppable motion born of belief, discipline, and machinery, all moving as one. The laughter that began in 1939 ended in 1945, not in speeches, not in surrender, but in silence, the silence of a nation that finally understood what it had underestimated.